There comes a moment in life when you realize no one is coming to fix it. No one's going to wake you up early, rewrite your habits, silence the noise in your head, or drag you to your potential. That weight, that discipline, that responsibility, it's yours. And the day you accept that, fully, deeply, without excuses, is the day your real life begins. You see, we waste so much time waiting for permission, for validation, for the right conditions to start. But you don't need any of that. You need focus, ruthless, quiet, daily focus, not on them, not on what you can't control, but on you. On building the strongest, clearest, most resilient version of yourself, even when it's hard, especially when it's lonely. Because no one claps for the early mornings. No one notices the moments you choose discipline over comfort. No one sees you say no to distractions, sit in silence, pick yourself up again and again. But those are the moments that matter, the ones that shape you into someone who doesn't just hope for success, but becomes it. This episode isn't about motivation. It's about truth, about holding yourself to a higher standard than the world holds you to, about showing up every day with one goal, to focus on you until you win, and not for applause, not for approval, but because deep down you know this life is yours and no one's going to live it for you. So, let's begin. 1. Focus fully on building your strongest self every day. No one becomes powerful by accident. No one wakes up one day full of clarity, strength, and momentum without first enduring the quiet grind that no one talks about. The truth is, success never begins in the spotlight. It begins in silence, in those early mornings when you don't feel like it, in those lonely hours when no one is watching, and especially when no one is clapping. That's where the strongest version of you is born, not out of comfort, but out of consistency. This chapter isn't about inspiration, it's about intention. It's about realizing that every single day you spend hesitating, doubting, procrastinating, scrolling, complaining, you are silently placing a debt on your future. And that debt doesn't go away. It compounds. It shows up later as regret, as lost momentum, as missed opportunities that you won't even recognize because you weren't ready to receive them. You don't get stronger by chance. You get stronger by showing up, especially when it's hard. So let me ask you, what are you choosing each day? Because you are always choosing. Every time you reach for your phone instead of that book, every time you make an excuse instead of moving your body, every time you say yes to what drains you and no to what could build you. These aren't neutral moments. They are bricks, bricks in the foundation of your future self. And what you build or neglect today becomes the ground you stand on tomorrow. The world has trained you to wait for motivation, as if you need to feel good to do good. But motivation is fleeting. It's emotional. Discipline is what carries you when motivation disappears. And it will disappear, often. Which is why your power cannot come from how you feel. It must come from what you decide. Not once, not sometimes, but every single day. You have to become your own coach, your own accountability, your own rescue. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. No one is coming. No one is going to pull you out of that fog, out of that rut, out of that cycle. But that's not the bad news. That's the gift. Because if no one is coming to save you, it means you're free to save yourself. Start where you are. Build what you can with what you have. Don't wait for perfect conditions. The strongest people you know, they didn't have perfect starts. They just stopped making excuses. They stopped negotiating with their potential. And they started doing the work that most people avoid, the quiet, repetitive, unseen effort that turns ordinary days into extraordinary results. So building, read instead of scrolling, train instead of making excuses, focus instead of fleeing, choose silence over distraction, choose depth over noise, choose what makes you stronger every time you can, because those tiny choices are what determine everything. You're not weak, you're just scattered. And the moment you focus fully on yourself, not occasionally, not when it's convenient, but daily, everything begins to shift. Because the truth is, you don't need saving. You just need commitment. 2. Train your mind to ignore all outside noise. The world is loud, not just in volume, but in intention. Everywhere you turn, something is trying to pull your attention. The news, opinions, comparisons, trends, likes, comments, expectations. And if you don't train your mind to protect itself, it will be owned by whatever screams the loudest. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. Because distraction is easier than direction. Because fitting in feels safer than standing out. But here's the truth. The stronger your mind becomes, the quieter the world starts to feel. Not because the noise disappears, but because you've finally stopped letting it in. The Stoics warned us about this centuries ago. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Why? Because people will always have something to say about your path, especially when it doesn't look like theirs. If you listen to them, you shrink. You begin to edit your life to match their limitations. You trade your vision for their approval. And before you know it, your life isn't yours anymore. It's a mirror, reflecting other people's fears, doubts, and confusion. To truly focus on you, you must train your mind to become your sanctuary, not your battleground. That starts with a radical commitment to mental clarity. You can't grow when your attention is hijacked. You can't evolve when your mind is cluttered with commentary from people who don't even live the kind of life you want. And most importantly, you can't move forward when every step you take depends on being seen, praised, or validated. Training your mind doesn't mean cutting off the world. It means learning to filter it, to know what's worth your energy and what isn't. Not every comment deserves a reply. Not every message needs to be read. Not every opinion carries weight. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to explain your decisions. You need one thing: inner clarity. A clear sense of who you are, what you're building, and why it matters. Think of your mind like a room. Would you let anyone just walk in, dump trash on the floor, and rearrange the furniture? Of course not. But that's exactly what you do when you let the outside world take residence in your inner space. When you allow gossip, comparison, criticism, and noise to live rent-free in your thoughts, you wouldn't tolerate it in your home, so why tolerate it in your head? Training your mind means setting boundaries, not just with people, but with information. It means being intentional with what you consume. Audit your feed, your conversations, your inputs. If it's not helping you grow, focus, or deepen your purpose, cut it. It's not arrogance, it's clarity. This kind of mental discipline doesn't show up overnight. It's built, one moment at a time. Each time you catch yourself reacting, pause, breathe, ask, is this helping me build, or is this dragging me down? The more you do this, the stronger you get. You start to hear the noise, but it doesn't enter you. It passes, because you've created something louder inside, your vision, your values, your direction. And that's what this chapter is about. Not escape, not ego, but precision. because the world will always try to distract you, and if you don't decide what matters most, someone else will decide it for you. So guard your mind. Train it like it's sacred, because it is. 3. Fight for your dreams when no one believes. At some point on your journey, you'll feel it, that cold silence when your dream stops making sense to everyone else. The excitement fades, the support shrinks, the world moves on, and there you are, still holding a vision that no one claps for. That's the test. That's where most people stop, not because the dream isn't real, but because they expected someone else to believe in it more than they did. But here's the truth. You go first, before the world sees it, before the results show, before the people you love understand. You go first, with shaky hands, with no guarantees, with a quiet fire inside you saying, "I don't care who doubts. I'm building this anyway." The Stoics knew the power of internal commitment. They didn't wait for applause. They didn't need crowds to stay disciplined. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire and still wrote to himself daily, not to impress, but to remind himself why he must stay the course. Because belief, real belief, isn't loud. It doesn't scream. It doesn't beg for validation. It whispers over and over again, "Keep going, keep building, keep showing up." There's a reason why most people don't achieve their dreams. It's not because they're not talented. It's because they gave up the moment things got quiet. They mistook the silence for failure. They thought the absence of support meant the absence of worth. But the silence is where champions are made. The silence is where you learn to become your own fuel. Because if you need the world to cheer for you before you act, you'll never move. And if you stop moving, the dream dies. So what do you do when no one believes? You keep showing up. You build it anyway. You fight, not for attention, but for alignment. You remind yourself that belief isn't something you receive. It's something you choose every day. In the early mornings, in the rejections, in the confusion. You believe because you know this dream didn't appear in your heart by accident. You believe because you're tired of living halfway. You believe because shrinking no longer feels safe. It feels suffocating. Let's make this real. Maybe you're trying to start something new, a business, a habit, a change in identity, and no one around you gets it. They mock it. They minimize it. They say, "Why bother?" Or, "That's not who you are." But the truth is, they don't have to understand. They're not the ones waking up with your vision. They're not the ones carrying that quiet urgency inside. You are, and that makes it yours to protect. Some days will feel like you're walking through fog. Some nights you'll cry. Some moments you'll want to scream, "Why isn't it working?" But keep walking. Keep building. Because the work you're doing now, the belief you're holding through darkness, that's what transforms you. Not just into someone who reaches their dream, but someone who earned it, who became the kind of person worthy of carrying it. This chapter isn't just about chasing dreams, it's about owning them, defending them, even when you're the only one who sees their value, especially then. Because the dream isn't waiting for applause. It's waiting for you to show it that you're serious. So go first. Stand alone if you have to. Be misunderstood. Be doubted. Be ignored. But never, never stop believing. 4. Show up for yourself every single day. The truth is simple, but hard. If you don't show up for yourself, no one else will. The world will not pause and pull you toward your potential. Opportunities won't knock if you haven't built the door. Progress doesn't wait for motivation to appear. And success never arrives for those who only act when it feels good. The real change begins on the days you don't want to show up and do anyway. Most people wait. They wait for clarity, for a sign, for energy, for the right mood. But champions aren't made in the mood. They're made in the ritual, the discipline of presence, the decision to take one step forward, even when everything inside you wants to stall, scroll, or sleep. You show up, not because the path is easy, but because the alternative, a life half-lived, is unbearable. Showing up doesn't mean you always win. It doesn't mean you feel powerful. It doesn't even mean you're certain. It means you choose alignment over avoidance. It means you respect your goals enough to keep the appointment, especially when it's only with yourself. That workout, that writing session, that study hour, that moment of reflection, these things aren't just tasks, they're votes. And every day you show up, you're voting for the person you're becoming. But let's be honest, showing up is lonely. No one sees the skipped distractions. No one claps for the daily grind. No one celebrates the consistency that's invisible from the outside, but your future self sees it. And they're waiting for you to keep going. They're watching every small act, every quiet repetition, every time you choose growth over comfort. Because that's what separates the dreamers from the doers. Presence, not grand gestures, not overnight success, just showing up over and over again. Think about the days you didn't feel like it, but still moved. How did you feel afterward? Tired, maybe, but more often, proud, clear, alive. That feeling isn't an accident. It's your soul responding to the alignment between who you say you want to be and how you actually lived. And the opposite? You know that feeling too. The disappointment that settles in when you avoid the work. The shame that creeps in when you break your own word. That quiet voice that says, "We said we'd try, and we didn't." That's not guilt. That's your integrity asking for consistency. That's your higher self knocking gently. So what does it really mean to show up? It means you start, even when it's messy. You continue, even when it's slow. You return, even after you've fallen. Because progress isn't always visible. Sometimes it's subtle. It's showing up again when you feel lost. It's the 1% you add when no one is watching. It's not sexy, but it's sacred. This chapter is your reminder. Perfection isn't the goal. Presence is. You don't need to crush every workout. You need to show up for it. You don't need to write a book in one night. You need to keep writing. You don't need to transform in a week. You need to build brick by brick. Because the ones who win, they're not the most talented. They're the most present, the ones who show up every single day. 5. Cut out every distraction that weakens your focus. In today's world, distraction isn't an accident. It's a business model. Every app, every platform, every screen is engineered to pull your attention away from yourself and place it into someone else's agenda. And if you're not fiercely intentional about your focus, you will lose it, not because you're lazy, but because you live in an environment designed to make you scattered. That's not an exaggeration. That's reality. And the cost? It's not just lost time. It's lost clarity, lost direction, lost self-respect. Focus isn't something you find. It's something you build, piece by piece, through subtraction, through the discipline of saying no. No to the constant checking, no to the endless scrolling, no to conversations that drain you, routines that dull you, environments that blur your mind. Because your mission requires energy, and energy leaks through every hole you leave open. This chapter isn't a suggestion, it's a warning. Every day you let distraction run your life, you're giving up something you'll never get back. And what's worse, You're training your brain to crave noise, to mistake movement for meaning, to chase novelty over depth. That's not just a productivity issue, that's a purpose issue. Seneca said, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." And he was right. If your attention is scattered across 10 things, you will master none of them, and deep down, you'll feel it, that tension of being busy but not fulfilled, of doing so much, yet getting nowhere. That's the tragedy of distraction. It keeps you active enough to avoid guilt, but passive enough to avoid progress. So how do you reclaim your focus? Ruthlessly. You begin with an audit of your environment, your devices, your time, your energy. What's taking more than it's giving? What's interrupting your momentum? What's preventing your deep work, your clear thoughts, your spiritual stillness? Identify it, then eliminate it, or at the very least, contain it. Set boundaries, not just for people, but for technology, entertainment, even your own compulsions. Structure your space like your future depends on it, because it does. Design your mornings to be quiet. Design your workspace to be clean. Design your schedule to protect what matters. Because clarity doesn't come from force, it comes from space. And don't fall for the lie that focus has to be dramatic. It's not about working 12 hours straight or cutting off the world completely. It's about choosing what gets your full attention and what doesn't. It's about being intentional with your energy. When you eat, eat. When you train, train. When you create, create. That's what makes your presence powerful. Not that it's perfect, but that it's pure. Most people will never taste deep focus. They'll live in surface mode, reacting, swiping, clicking, wondering why they feel anxious and empty. Don't let that be you. You are building something greater, and that requires a mind that is sharp, steady, and still. So ask yourself now, what distractions have I been tolerating? What are they really costing me? And more importantly, what would happen if I removed them? Because every time you choose focus, you choose freedom, and the more you protect it, the more you reclaim your life. 6. Own your life without blaming anyone for anything. There comes a point where you must stop pointing fingers, not because others didn't hurt you, not because circumstances were fair, but because blame doesn't build anything. It delays, it traps, it keeps you rooted in a story where you're powerless. And if you stay in that story long enough, you'll forget that you can actually change the ending. Blame is seductive. It makes you feel momentarily justified. It gives you a target, a reason why things aren't working. But that comfort is an illusion, because every moment spent blaming is a moment not spent building. You can't focus on growth while your energy is tied to resentment. You can't move forward while your mind is stuck in rewind. And no matter how valid your pain is, it's still your life to live. The Stoics taught this through action, not emotion. They believed your response is always more important than your story. Marcus Aurelius, facing war, betrayal, and disease, didn't ask, "Why me?" He asked, "What can I do right now that aligns with my principles?" That's ownership. It's not about denying the pain. It's about deciding who you're going to be in response to it. Owning your life means taking full responsibility for your direction, even if you didn't cause the storm you're standing in. It's saying, "I didn't choose this, but I choose how I respond to it." That shift is where all your power lives. And that shift doesn't require perfect conditions. It requires courage. It requires honesty. It requires looking in the mirror and saying, "I've let things slide. I've waited for too long. I've blamed for too much. It's time to reclaim my role in this story." Let's be real. You have every right to be angry. Maybe they betrayed you. Maybe life handed you things no one should have to endure. But what you do next, that's yours. That's your freedom. And it starts by dropping the need for apology, closure, or fairness, and picking up a stronger truth. You are not defined by what happened to you. You are defined by what you do with it. And yes, ownership is hard, because it means there's no one left to blame. No more excuses to hide behind. No more delays. Just you, your choices, and the future you're either building or avoiding. But there's a strange kind of peace that comes with that. A quiet empowerment that says, if it's on me, that means I can change it. So stop waiting for someone to make it right. Stop waiting for circumstances to get easier. Stop waiting for the past to release you. Release yourself. Not because you have to, but because you can, and because your future deserves a version of you that is no longer tied to a victim identity. Ownership isn't about guilt. It's not about shame. It's about liberation. It's about looking at your life in its mess and beauty and saying, this is mine, and I will not waste it blaming anyone or anything for where I stand. That's where growth begins, not in excuses, but in extreme responsibility, not in waiting, but in walking forward today. 7. Push yourself harder when you feel like quitting. There's a moment in every journey when quitting whispers the loudest. You're tired. You feel behind. Nothing seems to be changing fast enough. The doubts are louder than the reasons you started, and in that moment, when giving up feels more logical than pushing forward, you reach a fork in the road, fold or fight. This chapter is about that exact moment, because it's in that moment, not the easy ones, not the motivated ones, where your future is decided. Everyone is strong when things are working. Everyone is disciplined when they're inspired. But the ones who win are the ones who keep showing up when the motivation is gone, when it hurts, when it's quiet, when nothing is certain. That's where real grit is forged, not in light, but in pressure. Most people quit too soon, not because they weren't capable, not because their goal wasn't worthy, but because they mistook resistance for failure. They thought pain was a sign to stop, when in reality, pain is often a sign you're growing. Think about it. When you build muscle, it tears before it grows. When you break old habits, your mind resists. When you rise above your old identity, your comfort zone screams for you to come back. That discomfort, it's not the end. It's the signal that you're breaking through. The Stoics taught this in every page of their writings. Epictetus said, difficulties are things that show a person who they are. In other words, pressure isn't the enemy, it's the mirror. It reveals what you're really made of. And it gives you the chance to prove, not to the world, but to yourself, that you won't collapse at the first sign of resistance. Let's bring this closer to home. Maybe you're building something, a business, a body, a mindset, a new way of life, and it feels like nothing is working. You've done the reps, put in the hours, but the results are slow. You're exhausted, alone, invisible. And the question creeps in, what's the point? Here's the answer. The point is you. The point is becoming the kind of person who doesn't stop when it's hard, who doesn't give up just because it's quiet, who doesn't need applause to keep moving, because every time you push through that wall, you change. You upgrade your tolerance for discomfort, you increase your capacity for resilience, and you set a new standard for who you are becoming. This doesn't mean ignore your limits, it means redefine them. Because most limits aren't physical, they're psychological. The line you think is the edge usually isn't. There's more inside you, more strength, more focus, more fight. But you'll never find it if you quit the moment things feel heavy. So next time that moment hits, when you feel like quitting, pause, breathe, and say to yourself, one more rep, one more page, one more hour, one more day. That's how the wall breaks. That's how the new identity forms. Not in leaps, but in one more. And one day, you'll look back, and you'll see that the day you almost quit was the day you started to become unstoppable. 8. Trust your process, even when results are invisible. There's a stretch on every path where things feel stuck. You're putting in the work. You're staying disciplined. You're doing everything right, but nothing is showing. No applause. No big breakthrough. No confirmation that it's working. Just silence, stillness, doubt. And in that space, most people walk away, not because they failed, but because they stopped believing in what they couldn't yet see. But the truth is, real growth is slow, quiet, invisible. Like a seed beneath the soil, there are weeks, even months, where nothing appears above ground. But something is happening. Roots are forming. The foundation is being laid. And if you walk away too soon, you'll never know what was just beneath the surface, waiting for your persistence. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't measure progress by external recognition. They measured it by internal alignment, the calm that comes from knowing, I am doing the right thing, even if no one sees it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, just that you do the right thing, the rest doesn't matter. Not the applause, not the reward, just the integrity of showing up for what matters. Trusting your process means staying loyal to the work, not the outcome. It means remembering that transformation doesn't send you a notification. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It sneaks in during the grind, in the representatives, in the reading, in the reflection. You don't notice it in the moment, but one day you wake up and realize, I'm stronger, I'm clearer, I don't react like I used to, I've grown, but only if you stayed long enough to reach that point. Most people bail in the in-between, when the results slow down, when the initial motivation dies, when the scale doesn't move, when the feedback fades. That's when the mind says, it's not working. But that voice isn't truth. It's fear. It's impatience disguised as logic. And if you believe it, you'll keep jumping from one thing to another, never giving anything enough time to transform you. Trusting the process is an act of courage. It's saying, I will plant the seed. I will water it. I will wait. Not because it feels good every day, but because I know that nothing meaningful grows overnight. And even when I can't see it, I know it's working. This applies to everything: your healing, your business, your fitness, your character. You don't become powerful in one dramatic shift. You become powerful by choosing not to quit day after day, especially when no one would blame you for walking away. So today, ask yourself, where am I being tempted to give up too soon? What part of me is asking for instant results instead of long-term evolution? And then remind yourself, the roots are forming, the silence is working, the path is unfolding, even if you can't see it yet, because success doesn't always knock. Sometimes it waits, quietly, to see if you'll stay. 9. Stay locked in on your vision until you win. The world won't steal your vision all at once. It'll chip away at it, piece by piece. It'll distract you with what's urgent instead of what's important. It'll feed you noise, obligations, temptations, things that feel good in the moment but pull you quietly away from your path. And that's the real danger. Not failure, not chaos, but slow, invisible drift. One day of skipping your routine, 1 week of saying yes to everything except your priorities, 1 month of being too busy to reflect, and suddenly you're far from where you said you'd be. That's why this chapter matters so much, because no matter how strong your vision is today, it won't last without protection. Focus is not permanent. It's something you have to guard, deliberately and consistently. The people who win don't just have goals. They have systems to protect those goals from the world's constant attempts to blur them. They know that every distraction has a cost, every detour requires recovery, and every lost hour becomes a missed brick in the foundation of their future. So what does it mean to stay locked in? It means waking up and remembering why you started, before the emails, before the news, before the noise. It means designing your environment to serve your mission, not challenge it. It means choosing your thoughts with the same care you choose your food, your circle, your schedule, because your thoughts become your direction, and your direction becomes your destiny. When you're locked in, your vision isn't something you hope to achieve. It's your orientation. It's what you align your choices with, what you build your day around. You don't just work hard, you work with clarity. And that clarity becomes a filter for everything. Does this move me closer to my goal or further away? Is this task, this person, this habit reinforcing the future I've committed to or eroding it? Marcus Aurelius, who led an empire, reminded himself daily to return to first principles. Even in the middle of war and chaos, he stayed connected to his inner compass. Why? Because the external world is always unstable. But your mind, when trained, when focused, can become your anchor. And if your vision lives only in your feelings, it will vanish the moment your mood shifts. But if it lives in your habits, your systems, your rituals, then nothing can move it. Here's the trap. Most people start strong. They get excited. They map the vision. They feel the motivation. But the moment the results are delayed, the moment the world doesn't applaud, they drift. They scroll. They doubt. They seek comfort. Not because the vision changed, but because they stopped feeding it. That's what staying locked in prevents. It keeps the fire alive, not through inspiration, but through discipline, through structure, because your energy is limited, and if you don't direct it, it will be scattered. And scattered energy never builds anything worth keeping. So how do you protect your vision in practical terms? You say no, often, to what drains you, to what confuses you, to what distracts you from your values. You track your progress, even if it's slow, because measurement reinforces intention. You simplify, you clarify, you automate what doesn't matter so you can give your best energy to what does. And most of all, you remember. You reconnect with your why daily. You visualize the outcome. You remind yourself, this isn't a hobby, this is a mission. And when you treat your goals with that kind of seriousness, the world begins to respond differently. Not because it changed, but because you did. Your vision is sacred, but it's not self-sustaining. It needs fuel. It needs space. It needs you at your sharpest, clearest, most focused. So ask yourself today, have I been protecting my vision or slowly abandoning it? Have I allowed distraction to become the default? What would it look like if I locked in fully and refused to come off my path until I won? Because you're not here to dabble. You're not here to almost succeed. You're here to win. And the only way to do that is to stay locked in. Not until you get tired. Not until life gets loud. but until the vision becomes reality. 10. Rise again every time you fall or feel lost. Falling is not failure. Feeling lost is not weakness. These moments, the quiet crashes, the internal confusion, the days when nothing makes sense, they are not the end of your journey. They are part of it. And if you misunderstand them, if you let them define you, you'll never see what they were there to teach you. That every fall is an invitation. Every dark day is a mirror. Every setback is asking you one simple question. Will you rise again? This final chapter isn't about perfection. It's about power, the kind you can't fake, the kind that's built when everything falls apart and you don't. When the momentum disappears, but your decision doesn't. When you feel bruised, disappointed, discouraged, but you still stand up, even if it's shaky. Because that act, the quiet rising, is the most powerful thing you will ever do for yourself. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's real. The Stoics never promised comfort. They promised clarity, and clarity reveals this truth. You will fall. You will fail. You will face things that break your plan, shatter your confidence, shake your identity. But none of that determines who you are. What defines you is what happens after. The moment you decide that your last mistake doesn't get the final word. The moment you choose to try again, not because it's easy, but because your future depends on it. Most people collapse at the emotional level, not because they're incapable, but because they thought pain meant something was wrong. It doesn't. Pain means something matters. Confusion means you're on the edge of something new. The void, the silence, the setback. It's not your end. It's your refining. You're being shaped, and the shaping hurts. But it builds a foundation that comfort never could. So when life knocks you down, breathe. Don't rush to fix it. Don't run to numb it. Sit with the lesson. Then get up, slowly, intentionally, with more wisdom than you had before. That's growth. That's evolution. That's what this entire journey has been about. Not building a perfect life, but building you into someone unbreakable. Let's talk practically. You missed a week at the gym. You broke your routine. You gave in to distraction. So what? That doesn't erase your effort. That doesn't mean you're back at zero. It means you're human. It means the path is real. The next step isn't guilt. It's recalibration. You show up again. You do the next rep. You write the next page. You make the next right choice. That's how you win. Not by being flawless, but by being faithful. To yourself, to your future, to the life you said you'd build. And if you've fallen hard, really hard, and you don't know where to begin, start with this. Forgive yourself. Then move. One small action, one clear breath, one solid decision. Do that enough times, and the ground that once shattered you becomes the ground you rise from. Resilience isn't just about endurance. It's about trusting that the fall won't define you, unless you let it. It's about remembering that this isn't your first hard day. You've survived before, you've risen before, and you will again. So here at the end of this journey, ask yourself, what am I waiting for to rise? Permission? Perfection? Applause? You don't need any of that. You just need to remember who you are and stand. Because the people who win are not the ones who never fell. They're the ones who refused to stay down. This journey wasn't just about focus. It was about returning to yourself. Because in the noise, in the distractions, in the failures, in the expectations, you forgot. You forgot who you are when you're silent. Who you become when you commit. What happens when you stop looking outward and start building inward? That's what this episode was about. Not chasing success, but earning it. From the inside out, you've heard 10 truths, 10 reminders, 10 commands to come back home, to your effort, to your vision, to your process, to your fight. And now the question is simple. Will you act on them? Will you stop negotiating with your potential? Will you stop waiting for applause, for clarity, for motivation, and start moving anyway? Because the ones who win, they're not special, they're not lucky, they're not chosen, they're relentless, they're focused, they're the ones who show up when it's quiet, who rebuild when it falls apart, who protect their vision like it's sacred, because it is. So focus on you, not for a week, not until things get hard, but until you win. Not for them, for you, because you're worth it, because you've wasted enough time, because you know, deep down, that everything changes the moment you change. You don't need more time, you need a decision, you need focus, you need you, fully committed. So get up and start building.